Okay, so it looks like our room is starting to fill up. People can continue to just come in. We're going to just get started. So first, we're just going to walk through a few quick updates and announcements. And then we're going to be hearing from Bethany Patten, who's one of our fellow ambassadors, but joining us to talk about her work with MIT and the Climate Pathways Project. And at the end of the session, we'll connect, share experiences, do some breakout rooms, and ask some questions about what we've been discussing today. So thanks again for being here. So as many of you already know, we just wanted to reshare one of the exciting additions to the simulator that we have added just now in the past month. So you may have already seen this, but we have 5 new critical climate impacts that we have added graphs for. So we have sea level rise, population exposure, ice-free Arctic summers, crop yield decreases, all of these really important things that you can now use En-ROADS to visually explore. The graphs are really, really engaging and amazing, and our team has put a lot of work into them. So if you haven't yet seen those, you can explore them under the graphs and impacts section. They can really add a lot to your workshop or your game, and can be used to talk about a lot of really interesting co-benefits and talking points. Also, we're really excited to announce that in the next month, we're going to be releasing another climate impact, and this will be a really impressive build out we've done through a collaboration with Climate Central. So you'll actually be able to use the technology that they've developed to visualize sea level rise within En-ROADS. So you'll be able to bring up a map, explore anywhere in the world, and see how building your climate scenario or your climate future actually impacts sea level rise up to 2100. So that's a really cool new feature that should be coming in just the next few weeks. So keep an eye out for that if that's something interesting to you. We also have some upcoming events we just wanted to share quickly. So this is just the standard workshop on October 21st. We'd love to see you there, or feel free to invite any of your colleagues, coworkers, friends you're trying to give them a taste of what En-ROADS is like. And you can find that registration link on our website on our events page, which we can share in the chat. And then in a similar vein to the sea level rise update, we're going to be doing a webinar. So some of you may have been there for our impacts webinar just last week. This will be just another exploration of the new feature in En-ROADS, showing you how to potentially a workshop demo, something along those lines, but just kind of exploring that build out and giving you some background into the work that we've been doing there. So welcome to those of you that are new since the training, but to those of you who have been here, you might have seen our numbers increasing pretty quickly. We now have 378 ambassadors from 50 different countries, our languages exploding into 32 languages. We're so excited for all of the new people who have joined us. We wrapped up our new training program launch in August, but it's still an ongoing thing. The live sessions have just winded down, but we're really excited for those who've joined, and we've been seeing plenty of new events happening across the globe. Here's a great example: the climate action simulation being run in Paris, France by Marie. Another workshop by Yusuf in Nigeria. I think my slide is frozen. Sorry about that. We have Polly in Los Angeles and Gabriella running a virtual workshop in French. We have Xiao Chin Lo in Taiwan and Rob in the UK. We're just so excited to see all the different formats, to see people, with their friends, their family, coworkers, colleagues, presenting to large groups of people from all over the world. And we're really stoked when you guys share these things with us. So if you want to share your photos with us, please either tag #En-ROADS on social media, or you can just email us using this account. But we love to hear from you. We love to hear about your events. So please keep us in the loop on that. So now that we've kind of wrapped up some of our announcements and introduction, I'd love to introduce Bethany. So Bethany is a fellow En-ROADS climate ambassador, but she's also a lecturer and senior associate director at MIT Sustainability Institute. So She's also a core member of the Climate Pathways Project, for which she'll tell you more about. And she wanted to, bring some of her insights that they've gained in engaging policymakers with En-ROADS. So Bethany, I will pass it off to you. And if you need, we can set you up on a screen share. Just let me know. So I'll stop right now.
Thanks, Caroline. And it's good to see everyone. And I do have a couple of slides that might be, they're not essential, but it might just be illustrative. So should I just share, or do you need to give me permission?
I think try to share. And yeah, if you have an issue, we can connect you right away.
Okay, here we go. And I have still not learned how to do just like full screen on my PowerPoint. So you guys can have a preview of things to come over there on the left, but I'll make sure that it's as big as possible so that people can see it. Thanks for the great introduction. And it's really great to see everybody here. I realize that we're we're more of an international audience here. And I think a lot of what I'm going to be sharing today is more from our experience with interacting with US policymakers. That being said, our project that I'm going to talk to you about is not confined to the US. It just happens to be where our opportunities came up over the last couple of years, and also a little bit of an indication of, just what was going on politically in the US at the time. We really, as you all know, didn't have much of an international presence around climate change. And so, if you're talking about it from a policy perspective, it was really much more insular, but things have changed, which is great. And we certainly are seeing an uptick in interest from people across the globe in terms of our project. So really interested in hearing everybody's perspective on engaging with policymakers as we go through this presentation. But again, my perspective is going to be US focused for today. So what I want to talk to you about just very briefly is the Climate Pathways Project, which wouldn't exist if it wasn't for En-ROADS. And so just putting that out there to begin with. In addition, it's a project that is it's a three-legged stool. It's Climate Interactive and En-ROADS, the MIT Sustainability Initiative, and one of our donors, Michael Sonnenfeld, who is also a graduate of MIT Sloan and a member of our advisory board, and has really made the last 40 years of his career be about solving climate change and connecting with policymakers. And so when he found out about the En-ROADS tool and that it was, and how effective it was in engaging large audiences of people and having them actually change some of their behaviors, he immediately saw that as an opportunity to engage policymakers. And so from that realization, helped us to form what we're calling the Climate Pathways Project. So what this is essentially is an opportunity to advance evidence-based climate policy through top decision maker engagement with interactive simulations. And so, a lot of garble to say we are targeting top decision makers and showing them En-ROADS, which is what I think a lot of you guys have been doing. And so this is why it's so great to finally be able to connect with all of you and start to get some of your experiences together. To gather your experiences. The reason why it's important is why it's important for us to chat with you all is because we have three objectives for the project. So one is this mobilizing the high policy influencers. The Climate Pathways Project is not just about policy, it's also about high profile influencers in business and civil society. We're also looking at engaging across the entire spectrum of political perspectives. And our goal is that they will endorse the simulator as the standard tool for designing and comparing evidence-based climate strategies. The other thing that we do is consistently try to help enhance the capability of it. So, when we receive funding, we try to feed it back to Climate Interactive as much as we can so that we're all building on the best available science and responding to what's going on in the world on a daily basis. And then the third piece is that we want to significantly raise awareness of the power of the simulator in influencing policy and increasing the knowledge of climate change causes, dynamics, and impacts. Increasing effective engagement, including greater feelings of urgency and hope, and increasing a desire to learn more and to do more about climate change. And where those three buckets came from is research that was done out of UMass Lowell, as well as with Climate Interactive and a bunch of other folks, where they did extensive pre and post surveys of engaging with the C-ROADS model to see if it really changed behavior. And so based on the fact that there was actual research that showed that engaging with the model had this influence on people and their behavior and their sense of urgency around climate, we said, why can't we do that same thing with En-ROADS, and why can't we target certain kinds of audiences? And so the third piece of this project is really about, using this evidence-based methodology of engaging people to really make a difference in the world. So those are the three objectives, and I'm just going to take you through a couple of the results that we've seen so far. And then the other thing about significantly raising awareness of the power of the simulator is that we really are trying to not only have that be research-based, but also try to just publicly speak more about insights from the model. And I'm joined by my colleague, Crystal, who who is also an ambassador, which is great. She was an ambassador before we brought her on board a couple of weeks ago. And Crystal, do you just want to raise your hand and say hi so people can see you, and you'll just show up for a second?
Hey all, nice to meet you.
Great, thank you. So Crystal is really going to help us both with the policymaker engagement, but also with the outward communication on the work that we're doing with this policymaker engagement, as well as some other audiences that we're working at. Okay, so in terms of who's experienced En-ROADS through our efforts, and I'm sure that you guys all have additional engagements that we would love to hear about, similar to the way that we looked at the map earlier today and how we've been tracking who's been engaging with the model over the years. We do track who we've been engaging with as a direct effort of the Climate Pathways Project. So we've met with over 100 elected officials, and I think probably this staff members number is over 200 now. We've had a few meetings since the last time we pulled together this slide. And that includes US senators, representatives, governors, state legislators, caucuses, committees, coalitions. We've done one-on-one meetings, we've done group meetings, we've gone back and done briefings for, after we've done a big briefing, we've gone back and done deep dives into topics like the deployment of alternative fuel vehicles. We've done deep dives into methane. So not only have we had this kind of initial engagement with showing policymakers how the model works and how they can use it to make their own decisions, but also how perhaps research at MIT might be able to further some of the policy that they're considering. And this has especially been relevant in the infrastructure negotiations, as well as the reconciliation package that are happening as we speak. We've also engaged over 700 business leaders. This includes C-suite level executives. We've done presentations with boards. We've met with many trade associations. We've presented at business conferences. And so that really is this with an objective of saying, okay, if business has an influence on policy, let's make sure they're talking about climate in the right way. And let's make sure the right people in the right seats are understanding climate dynamics. And then also we've engaged dozens of leaders in the nonprofit, think tank, and foundation sector. And I think, this is, again, these are numbers from our own interactions. And I think ambassadors have probably done a lot of that work as well. So we would love to hear from you in terms of your experiences with any of these groups. The other piece of our objective is that we're really trying to get these policymakers not only interact with the model, but endorse it so that it gets some credibility. And, this is just a sampling of some of our proud moments. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse said, engaging with the En-ROADS climate simulation has been one of the best ways for me as a policymaker to learn about solutions to tackle climate change. Representative John Curtis out of Utah, who's a Republican, has said, what I like about En-ROADS is how it can support a really thoughtful conversation. I can see the ways that policy actions could be worth the pain. So, we've gotten over 15 written endorsements, including from the entire Democratic Governors Association. We've seen multiple op-eds that have referenced En-ROADS after having engaged with us, including Susan Davis, who's out of California, and Chuck Schumer, who you all know. And we also have seen nonprofits and think tanks and foundations use the model as they're doing advocacy training, including a training workshop that was organized by Ceres last year. Finally, when we're talking about impact, and this is really where we're hoping to engage you guys and have a conversation with you guys, we're working on a model that is going to measure the degree in which we can increase our influence and impact. So if you'll sort of look at this and kind of go through this continuum with me for a second, where we are right now, I'm going to look at the top here where it starts with host learning events. This is really what we're all kind of working on here. We're hosting learning events with policymakers, with business leaders, whoever we might be working with, I would consider these learning events, and maybe some informal briefings. But when we're talking about policy, this continuum of engagement and our ability to impact needs to extend much further than that, right? There's a whole ecosystem of policy influence, including letter writing from academics, policy briefs, attending committee hearings and testifying, producing studies, being part of any kind of messaging legislation. And again, this is in the US system. And then of course, there's past legislation that may have been influenced by some insights that people have gained from En-ROADS. And then there's effectively implemented legislation. Now, for us to be able to actually measure our impact within each of these continuums is going to be pretty hard. And we don't know exactly where the levers are in terms of increasing our influence and impact. And that's really where we want to be engaging you guys. So as you're talking to policymakers, and we really want this to be a discussion today, as you're talking to policymakers, what are you hearing from them in terms of who they think needs to know more about climate, or where they think the roadblocks are, or how we could potentially, or do we need to bring in like the big guns of faculty in order to talk to certain people? Is it more about corporate influence and therefore, any of us speaking might not make a difference at all? How do we move among this kind of continuum of engagement and increase our influence and impact using En-ROADS and presenting it to the right kind of people and the right kind of groups at the right time? So that's really what I'm hoping we'll kind of talk about today as a group, and I'm hoping some of the breakout sessions will bring that out. But I'm gonna stop there for a second because I know that Kurt has kind of a great little not a little case study, sorry, I don't mean to call it little, but has a case study in Massachusetts, how there's been an ability to influence. So Kurt, do you want to take it over from here?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Bethany. Just wanted to say a few words about this specific situation that we have in Massachusetts, and also want to acknowledge also on the call, I believe, are David Mazumder and Rob Bunny, who I've spoken with about some of these opportunities as well. So in the state of Massachusetts, which is fairly progressive in taking action on climate, we recently passed a sweeping, ambitious climate roadmap bill that tries to put some things in place to get us to net zero emissions by 2050. Leaves a tremendous amount of details open for subsequent legislation and implementation. So Bethany, I appreciate it on your last slide. Passing legislation is not the end game. It's got to be effectively implemented, and that's really, really key. So it feels to us in Massachusetts like this is kind of a perfect setting to bring a model like En-ROADS, the scope of all of the policies that are at play, because basically our law in the state has that kind of scope already built into it. All of these sectors, they're laying out some high level goals for progress, but then it really leaves open exactly how this is going to play out. And so, I approach this as primarily as a citizen advocate, and I work within 350 Massachusetts. We've got people who are involved in Citizens Climate Lobby and others to kind of get in there. If I can just share a slide, do I have the capacity to do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to do, present. There's several aspects that I think are particularly promising around using En-ROADS. First off, environmental justice for the first time has been codified into law, right? And so it's on the minds of many of our policymakers about what that looks like and how it influences progress on climate change overall. So it's a great setting. It's on people's mind to bring multi-solving into the equation right from the beginning. Within this climate roadmap bill are also high level directions around clean less electricity progress, increasing the amount of renewables, and definitely offshore wind is a big one. But exactly how that plays out and what happens to Massachusetts' enormous investment in fossil gas plants remains to be seen. What policies are actually going to move the needle in the right way? Massachusetts has a huge old building stock, our housing in particular. I know, a lot of it was built 100+ years ago, not very efficient. And so the roadmap bill says that we're going to, in essence, insulate and electrify about 1/3 of our homes by 2030. But exactly how that happens, left up, for people to work out. So we have things that are teed up around, say, cities that are able to adopt net zero stretch codes, but it's up to the city on a city by city basis, or cities saying we're not going to allow natural gas to be deployed any longer. So we can use the model to drop in no more new natural gas infrastructure on a particular date, or slide that date out and see how much that impacts the results. Last but not least, transportation is also part of this big sweeping thing. It's Massachusetts' largest contributor, fastest growing contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And so there's, at a high level, direction that we're going to do some incentives, we're going to do some more investments in public transit, but exactly how strong, how far, how fast that goes, left open. So I think from a kind of a citizen ambassador standpoint, the minds and the eyes and ears of our policymakers are open to having these broader conversations about, what does it look like to move this whole thing forward? What levers have more or less impact? It's a great situation. Rob or David, if you want to add any thoughts on that. I don't know if they can speak or if they're in the chat, but that's what it seems like to us in Massachusetts. And so we're trying to, tee up conversations with key legislators to go through this now. We've got stuff in session, and we're trying to make progress on it.
Great, thanks, Kurt. And yeah, Robert, David, if you just wanted to unmute, feel free. But going from there, I also saw Polly was asking a pretty good question to you both, Kurt and Bethany, in the chat. Do you think the global nature of En-ROADS will help you for policy comparison, or will allow the audience to say it is not applicable to them? How have you faced challenges with that, Kurt, in your experience?
Well, this comes up not just with policymakers, but in many En-ROADS events that I run, because people are grounded in a particular setting, and you say, well, if we are the leader and people kind of keep up with us around these policies, this is what can be achieved. I think people get that kind of intuitively. So, in the spirit of En-ROADS not being a precise answer machine for everything, I think that moves the conversation along. Bethany, how's that played out for you?
Yep. So we've encountered this both when we're talking to corporate audiences as well as policymakers. And we take two approaches. One is when we know we're going to be talking to somebody that's going to have more of a local perspective than an international perspective, we really try to make it relevant for what's happening in their particular region. So I mean, I can use the example of Massachusetts just because it's very familiar to me. We know what kind of what sources of energy are coming into Massachusetts. So we know where, it doesn't really matter to talk about coal in Massachusetts because nothing's happening with coal in Massachusetts anymore, but we can talk about natural gas. So we try to, and we can talk about, the deployment of renewables since there's, a big wind farm that's being talked about in Massachusetts right now. And so what we can do is we can look at policies that are going to be relevant in the particular region and then make it and tailor the presentation so that it resonates to the policymaker in that area. Similarly, with corporate audiences, you can, well, if you know that it's a business that is heavily, for instance, like a data center. So if we were to talk to somebody like Amazon or Salesforce, we would be talking about data centers and their draw on the energies, their energy supply and how switching to renewables is a really good corporate strategy. And then we would show how if everybody switched to renewables, this is what it would look like. So it takes a little bit of, actually it takes kind of a lot of research before the meeting to say, okay, how do I map the lever that's in En-ROADS to what I know is happening locally? But it actually does pay dividends because then when you're speaking to the policymaker, it's like, they're saying, oh, wow, you really understand my district and you understand my unique problems. The other thing I'll say is that building efficiency, as you guys know, when you pull that lever is very effective. And except for, developer influence tends to be sort of more politically feasible than some of the other policies. And so when I'm talking to policymakers specifically, I tend to make sure that they see that lever and then talk about political feasibility. So in addition to doing your pre-research on, what are the mapping the En-ROADS levers to what to be the issues in your area or in your region, it's also good to just think about, okay, what of these policies that I'm looking at do I know are politically feasible in my region, right? Like if you've been hearing about major arguments that are huge hurdles for your particular legislator to get over, and you come in and you say, wow, this lever, if we pull it, is going to be really fantastic. You'll see in their eyes this feeling of, gosh, I really wish I could do something about that, but there is absolutely no way. So it's good to just kind of read the room a little bit and do a little bit of advanced work. And we're also really happy to help out with that. I would say that in the Environmental Solutions Initiative, which is another initiative at MIT, there's a lot of work being done on more regional kind of awareness. Similarly, there's a project called the Roosevelt Project, which is out of the Center for Environmental and Energy Research and Policy Research, who have been looking at certain regions. So we are more than willing to help people who are going to meet with legislators to prepare. And also we're always happy to, provide faculty members from MIT who might have some, more specific knowledge in a particular area on certain kinds of policy or legislation.
I'll just say, hi everyone, this is David Mazumder. And I'll just say two other things on to tag on to Bethany's point there. One, I just wanted to highlight Rob's comment in the chat that we can frame the conversation around En-ROADS as looking at the relative impacts of these different policies. Just to reframe the sort of the takeaways that even if a group doesn't have direct control or jurisdiction over one of these levers, it can still be useful to look at how that would interplay with what they do have control over, in various hypothetical scenarios of whether there's federal action or some kind of international movement around a particular policy. The other piece of this that I found really helpful in having conversations, especially with nonprofit groups that are focused on a local or state level action, is to sort of broaden the perspective because oftentimes, there's only limited bandwidth that folks have to really know what's going on at all these different levels of government and potential policy action. And so I think it's useful sometimes to in addition to like diving in, making sure that you're prepared to speak to that particular group's concerns, to also broaden the conversation about and have them be aware of how what they're working on would be affected by and would interact with policies that could be adopted on another level of government.
Cool. One question that has been sent our way several times by many different people out there is, what's the best, are there any adjustments that you're making to kind of your delivery? Like, how do you structure your presentation to these decision makers? Is it kind of the standard En-ROADS workshop format, or what are you doing to adjust to bring in these kind of more specific issues?
I'll say a little bit on that. And this is my approach to any conversation with a legislator, is to start by making a personal connection, find out what is near and dear to their heart, and then try to build off of that. And it may take, 2 or 3 steps to get there, but these are people who are by and large really, really attuned to relationships. And so that's, I think, a really necessary starting point. There's got to be something among those 18 policy levers that's close to, some legislation that they're personally most invested in.
The other thing I would add to that is we notice that when we go in and meet with policymakers, especially elected officials who are constantly bombarded with people who are asking them to do things for them, that this kind of neutral broker of, here, I'm just going to teach you about climate science is a welcome relief. So, they're being lobbied all the time. So I find a very effective approach is to go in from the perspective of, I'm just here to help you learn for 20 minutes, a half an hour. I'm not here to push a particular thing. And, if you gain some insight at the end of it, that's really great. And that's my objective, is for you to gain an insight and for you to understand that acting on climate is urgent. And that tends to be a welcome kind of perspective for people who are constantly being asked to do stuff.
The other thing I'll say there, just to add on to Kurt's point, sometimes it's disappointing when they're very invested in a particular solution, and then you move the lever to the max, and it gets us 1/10 of a degree Celsius and in averted warming. And so I think it can be useful to be careful in how you frame the conclusions there, and also be prepared to show what policies might be especially complementary or synergistic with their chosen passion area, so that we can leverage that interest into expanding out to these other levers in the presentation.
Yeah, case in point, all we need to do is subsidize renewables.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing that. I was going to see if there's any other questions we could address right now, or I know we wanted to set aside like 10 to 15 minutes for breakout rooms, so we could kind of go either way. Why don't we jump into breakout rooms? Some of us will remain in the main room if you have a question for Kurt and Bethany, but we'd love for you all to get into these small groups and basically just share on either what your personal experiences are with leading an En-ROADS event with policymakers, or just questions you have. This is just to connect with others, to share, what you've seen so far, or what confusing points you have, or anything along those lines. And then come back to the main room and we can finish out with some Q&As. I think I have the breakout rooms. Okay, so I am going to create those now.
I've got it, Caroline.
Oh, just kidding.
I'm going to open up all the rooms. So you'll be invited to join right now. And yeah, again, just that topic, introduce yourselves. You all are amazing people, and then share any examples of how you've engaged decision makers or leaders.